Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. You're sitting in a gorgeous green park on a warm evening. You're kicking back, catching the sunset with a group of friends. Everyone is just totally relaxed, having a great time. But then, there's you. You're frantically swatting your arms, slapping your ankles, just completely surrounded by this buzzing swarm of mosquitoes. And meanwhile, your friends sitting literally right next to you haven't been bitten even once. You kind of feel like you've somehow become the main course at a buffet that nobody else was invited to.
So that brings us to a really big question. Is it just bad luck, or do mosquitoes actually have a favorite person? Well, get ready to feel a little bit vindicated, because the answer is a resounding yes, they absolutely do. But before you go blaming your so-called sweet blood, we need to clear the air. It has absolutely nothing to do with how sweet you are. It's actually all about the invisible signals your body is broadcasting into the environment right this very second.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, tracking the invisible CO2 trail. You see, tracking your signal begins with just the simple act of staying alive, breathing. 30. That is the distance, in feet, from which a mosquito can detect the carbon dioxide you release with every single breath you take. I mean, think about that for a second. Over 30 feet away. To a mosquito, the CO2 floating out of your mouth isn't just some random gas. It's a glowing, totally irresistible trail that they are perfectly evolved to follow. They are highly efficient long-range trackers. Basically, every exhale you make is like sending up a flare in the night sky telling them exactly where you are.
And this brings us to a super fascinating dynamic. Have you ever noticed how the adults at a backyard barbecue are usually getting eaten alive, while the kids running around right next to them seem perfectly fine? Well, it all comes down to volume. Adults are physically larger, right? So we naturally exhale a much bigger cloud of carbon dioxide. The larger that glowing cloud of CO2, the easier you are to find. So if you're standing right next to a child, the mosquito is going to lock onto your massive CO2 signal and just completely bypass the kid entirely.
But breathing is really only their long-range radar. Let's move to Section 2, chemical maps and body heat, and see how all this builds up when the mosquito actually gets close. Because once they pass those short-range sensors, our skin is just constantly releasing hundreds of its own clues.
And one of their absolute favorite things to detect is lactic acid. Lactic acid is a chemical produced by your body, especially when you're really pushing yourself during exercise, and it gets released right through your sweat. This is exactly why mosquitoes absolutely love targeting people who've just finished a sweaty workout or a long jog through the park. To you, you just feel like you've had a great workout. But to a mosquito, you are basically ringing the dinner bell.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that we humans don't smell these hundreds of chemicals radiating off our skin. But if you could somehow look through a mosquito's futuristic vision, you wouldn't see normal skin at all. You'd see these scent particles as bright, glowing trails leading directly to a target. Your invisible scent literally acts like a giant, brightly lit map. And sweat isn't the only thing lighting up that map. They can also see the actual warm heat waves rising right off your skin.
This combination of signals perfectly explains why pregnant women are often prime targets for mosquito bites. Biology changes a lot during pregnancy. Pregnant women naturally breathe out a higher volume of carbon dioxide, and they also tend to run a slightly higher body temperature. So in the eyes of a mosquito, a pregnant woman is simultaneously a larger CO2 beacon and a brighter thermal target than a regular adult standing nearby. It's a completely fascinating, albeit really annoying, biological reality.
All right, so we've got breath, we've got sweat, and we've got heat. But what about the most famous theory of them all? Let's take a look at Section 3, the blood type puzzle, and explore why it's really just one small piece of the pie. And this beautifully illustrates the reality of the situation. You've probably heard people say, oh, they're biting me because I have type O blood. And yes, research does suggest that people with type O blood might attract slightly more mosquitoes. But blood type is just one very small piece of the total attraction puzzle. The massive, undeniable factors at play here are the carbon dioxide you breathe, the body heat you radiate, and that lactic acid you sweat.
Which leads us to officially debunk this old wives' tale once and for all. Your blood is not sweeter. Mosquitoes are not flying around with a craving for sugar, looking for the sweetest person in the yard. They're operating on a purely biological level. Think of them more like tiny, highly specialized scientists. They are constantly analyzing a really complex mixture of invisible signals: air, heat, and chemicals. That is what draws them in. Definitely not a sweet tooth.
Knowing all of this is incredibly interesting, but it brings us to the most practical part of our explainer today. Section 4, building your best defense and making a hard target out of yourself. Because can we actually stop them from biting us?
While we obviously can't completely hide our biology, you do have to breathe after all, but we can definitely make ourselves a much harder target. First up, believe it or not, the color of your clothes matters immensely. Studies show mosquitoes are highly attracted to dark colors, particularly black and dark red. Why? Because dark colors stand out really clearly against the environment, especially as the sun goes down in the evening. So your absolute first line of defense is simply swapping out that black shirt for a white or light-colored one. That alone dramatically reduces your chances of being visually noticed.
But of course, the ultimate defense comes down to mosquito repellent. So the crucial point here is understanding how this stuff actually works. A lot of people think bug spray is some kind of poison that kills mosquitoes on contact. It's really not. Repellents actually work by confusing the mosquito's senses. When you apply repellent, you're essentially putting on an invisibility cloak. The chemicals in the spray blur the mosquito's futuristic vision, causing all those glowing scent trails of lactic acid and CO2 to just disappear. They might fly right past you, simply because their navigation systems have been totally scrambled and they can no longer find the map to your skin.
Which leaves us with this final thought. The next time you're sitting in the park with your friends and you happen to be the very first one bitten, take a deep breath, maybe a small one, so you don't release too much CO2, and ask yourself, will you blame bad luck or will you recognize the incredible biology at play? You aren't cursed. Your body is just a beautifully complex machine, constantly broadcasting signals that nature has designed a tiny detective to perfectly intercept. Stay curious about the science all around you, and hey, maybe just remember to pack a white shirt and some repellent next time you head